Welcome, everybody. This is another webinar in the Brain Aneurysm Foundation monthly webinar series. I'm Christine Buckley, Executive Director of the Brain Aneurysm Foundation, and I thank all of you for joining us. We have special webinar today, 30 years later, looking back with the BAF with our two founders, Dr. Christopher Ogilvy and nurse practitioner Deidre Buckley. So this is going to be recorded and we'll share it out. So with that said, first of all, welcome to Deidre and Dr. Ogilvy. We're really happy to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Excellent. Well, again, hopefully everyone knows we'll be celebrating 30 years this September 12th in Boston, coupled with our annual research grant symposium. So we decided to bring it back to Boston in order to celebrate this great anniversary. So today we're just going to learn a little bit more about how this organization came to be, what anyone thought it might be, and, thoughts for moving forward. So we're going to, first question is for Deidre. Can you tell us what prompted the start of the foundation?
Sure, I'd love to. So I worked at Mass General Hospital for a period of time. I worked with Dr. Ogilvy and Dr. Kroll for the Brain Aneurysm Center that was started there. And back in 1994, we had just started interventional procedures. So we did not only have surgery as an option, but we started coiling patients. So we had a patient who had a giant aneurysm. She was actually a nurse, and we ended up treating her with both coils and she had open surgery. So we talked during many procedures she had, how she was recovering and whatnot. There was nothing at that time, back in 1994, on the internet. I don't think there was an internet at that time. And so as she recovered and she did very well, she thought about starting a foundation. And we first started, thinking about support opportunities as well as education. So I, at that point, said, I'd love to help out in any way possible. And she knew a lawyer who would pro bono help us get this going. Dr. Ogilvy and I said we'd be very willing to help with any type of, educational materials, support groups, etc. And at that point, we just began, we met with lawyers and we got the ball rolling. So that was the beginning stages. And it took a while before the foundation actually got going. But, it took, we'd have meetings monthly and whatnot, a lot of patients were interested in helping us out. But the initial founding of this organization was because of a patient. So that's it.
All right. Thank you. That's great. Dr. Ogilvy, was it an easy decision for you to agree to become part of creating this foundation?
Oh, yeah. And I'm glad Deidre mentioned Bob Kroll was my partner at the time, and he subsequently is retired and in fact passed away a few years ago. And he was interested in this idea. And then Deidre really got interested in talking to this one patient, but Bob was interested in the potential. He didn't know what the word foundation meant, I'm pretty sure. Actually, nor did I, to be honest with you. But I remember Deidre had started a support group, and we were getting great feedback from that, and realized this was in an era where support groups weren't a common thing for different illnesses. Now they're very common for many different problems and illnesses, both psychological and physical. But back in that era, it just wasn't a done thing. And I do remember one time having a cookout, I think, down on the South Shore. She got the chairs from her brother, who was working in the grocery store industry, and some tables, and we had a picnic and a support group with patients, which, at that point, physicians interacting with patients in that fashion just wasn't that common. And it really brought a few things to light. And as Deidre said, we started it in our office, basically. I think our first fundraiser was like a bake sale or something. It was really a fledgling organization. We didn't know anything about nonprofits. We got Deidre got a pro bono lawyer involved. and they have to do a certain amount of pro bono work every year, thankfully. And they helped us get it started. It was really patients and their families. And as stated, the internet didn't exist. So there was zero information for patients about brain aneurysms. And so we started typing, literally drafting and typing and drawing diagrams just to give out in the office, let alone, nationally. And then we started making that information known more as widely as we could. Again, no internet, word of mouth, newspapers, telephone calls, whatever. I should tell you early on, as the foundation got going, I invited some then senior surgeons from around the country to be on the medical advisory board or to be part of it. And they reprimanded me and said, why was I doing this? Aneurysm patients get clipped and go home, and that's all we need to do. And meanwhile, Dee Dee and I knew very well that that's not all that was going on, and the many cognitive issues people can have after a hemorrhage, or even surgery without a hemorrhage, or treatment. The psychological impact of an aneurysm. All this was coming to very obvious light. In fact, we did research and wrote a paper by calling patients and getting their feedback, showing that so-called good grade aneurysm patients, really about 30% of them struggled with cognitive issues and higher level function. But the surgeons at the time were saying, an aneurysm's a bubble, we fix it, and then that's all you need to do. And it was becoming very obvious that's not all you need to do. But the information wasn't there. And so patients, when they're told, oh, you should be fine, that wasn't fair at all. So when they started talking to each other and building this network, it was extremely helpful in taking care of them, because they could talk to people. Dee Dee and I have taken care of thousands of aneurysm patients, but we never had one. And they could talk to people in a way that we couldn't. So the foundation, really, the goal was always support, education, and research. And then Christine, when you got involved, is really when the research element took off. But really, support and education was our first stab at trying to do anything in an area where there wasn't a whole lot available.
Really true.
Thank you, Dr. Ogilvy. Okay, so the next set of questions, pretty much you guys can jump in and answer how you'd like, because we can get both your perspectives. So the next question is, did you have any concerns as you started the foundation, or did you have any particular visions for the future?
Well, I think, ignorance is bliss. I was back, 30 years old at the time, or, however old I was. And I think we wanted to help, and we figured we'd do whatever. And I had no idea, honestly, the implications of a foundation, but we're willing to give it a go. And I think initially, the person who I spoke to, who really initiated the foundation, was willing to speak to at national meetings, and she did. And as Dr. Ogilvy said, a lot of the physicians did kind of laugh out loud, and why are you doing this? But we were pretty committed to our endeavor. The patient was very committed. And I do have to hand it to a couple of the medical advisory board members, such as Bob Brown, who was very supportive. Your Rosenwasser, Dr. Rosenwasser, who also was very supportive. But I think we had no idea what we were getting into, but we were willing to take a shot, and we did. And as Dr. Ogilvy said, we had very, very, fundraisers that were, I think one was at a hotel lobby, and someone knew someone who played a music instrument and had people gathering together. And people gave $10 or $20, and that was it. We had one patient who actually went door to door, which probably isn't the wisest thing to do, but people initially did really gravitate to this idea of support and awareness. And I think that's how we began. Later questions are, in terms of what the foundation does now. And I'm, thrilled to say that the research is a huge component, as well as advocacy is a huge component. But, I think, ignorance is bliss. And, I'm really happy we've come this far.
Dr. Ogilvy, you want to add to that, or did you have any expectations?
No, so there was tribulation, it was difficult because this was realized as it got going, the budget was meager, and we were able to get enough budget together to get a little office, which was right near the hospital, right around the corner. And this was staffed completely by volunteers, patients and their families, really. And, it wasn't staffed all the time. And when people called up, we'd send them in, they would be sent information. But, we didn't have any throttle on what was being discussed. However, being patients and their families, they were offering, the people who answered the phone were actually inadvertently offering support and information firsthand, which, coming from a patient or a family member meant a lot to people calling up from all over the place. And then there was, as the board formed, we helped, Dee Dee and I would help meet with on a regular basis, trying to be impartial, who was going to do what the tasks were at hand. And as the funding grew, what to do with that funding, how best to spend that. Should it be invested to make more money? And that was a little bit less of it. It was more about how to get the word out there. And then the internet came to light, and with that, things really took off, because now we could sort of centralize things. And Christine, when you started, we had a website, we had a web page, and we had information, but it was obviously not as well organized as it is now. However, that gave us a great venue to begin to disseminate information, and patients and families soon realized they were not alone. After one of these hemorrhages, that lots of people from all over the country, as you all have found, were having the same exact issues. And it didn't matter if their job before the hemorrhage was driving a truck or running a 500, a Fortune 500 company. They were having the same exact issues. And as they talked to each other, it gave a great amount of help in their recovery, especially as people recovered and could see others recover. It gave them hope that this is where you can get to. And not everyone makes a recovery, and then their lives are different and adjust, and they became aware of that as well. And that's hard to present in a 30 or 45-minute follow-up visit, to a patient who's a year or 6 months out. So it really began to become a big help in terms of, and a big part of taking care of people.
Just one thing too, I want to add, when we were getting going, I want to say probably around year 8, Christine got involved with the group, and we talked about doing a road race. And I think she got the first road race going. It was held in Marshfield in our town. That has been a huge success and one of our biggest money makers. And I think her involvement was great, but again, all volunteer. And like Dr. Ogilvy said, we were getting to the point where we had some money, but really not a lot. And I think at the 10-year mark, we finally decided we had to bite the bullet in terms of either we're going to have to get a paid help, or we're going to have to somehow give the money away, because we could not do it alone, because we had full-time jobs, and we couldn't depend on patients and families just to do it. So I think at that point, we did interview for directors, and lo and behold, I came back from a ski trip and Christine was the director. So that was, I think, at the 10-year mark, which made a huge difference. So for the first 10 years, we were all volunteer. And, I think we did what we could. The internet did start to come about. I do have to hand it to Dr. Bob Carter, who's a neurosurgeon at Mass General, who worked with us. He's there currently, but he was very involved with helping get the web names. I remember,
right.
Yeah, sitting down and grabbing the names for the group. And I think that was really critical at that point in time. So, I think with the involvement of Christine, her taking the job and then hiring her staff, we've come so far, in 30 years.
All right, thank you both. Next question, what parts of the foundation's mission are most important to you? And I'm sure it might be a combination of some, but of awareness, education, support, advocacy, and research funding.
Well, for me, I'll just say it's obviously support and awareness. So I started with support groups way back. I still have them now, virtual and live, in awareness. And I think those two are critical and you can do without the money. So it's again, just getting FaceTime with patients and families. You can help out with that. I mean, the research and the advocacy are a huge piece of it that I have been less involved with, but I think are critical to the growth of this organization.
Yeah, I really echo the thoughts of support and education, probably, although they're all equal. Now, I have really tried to adopt open mind thinking, and advocacy was something that was just not even on my radar. This is advocacy at the political level.
Right.
And in my ignorance, the first couple of times we went to Washington, I thought, how can we make a difference at all? However, with time, I've seen that element of the foundation take off. And now when we go to Washington, we are recognized. People recall us. We're pushing Ellie's Law. There's really momentum where, I wasn't aware that how that could happen or that it could happen successfully, but I see it now in motion. So that's been really a great delight. And I'll tell you, and all those listening, what Dee Dee was a little understated about the 10-year. I think that's when we gave the first research grant. But really, the funding that the Aneurysm Foundation had, Christine really helped push it over the top and say, we're going to give grants this year. And I think we gave 3 or 2 the first year, two grants, which almost completely emptied the coffers of any funding we had raised. However, both those grants went on to become NIH funded. They were seed money for very successful projects. And that really was the birth of the research side of things, which was, initially kind of a dream, and then it became true. And now it's going full steam. We see even bigger growth of that, not only national, but international. So that's become a great part of the foundation. And I will also tell you that we have at our annual research day, when we give out the grants, during the day, we do have a research symposium, which has become more like a think tank, because it's a very limited number of researchers, probably 50 or so, and their supporting staff. And we really get to discuss things. New ideas have been generated at that meeting. Collaborations have been generated at that meeting. People working in similar areas end up talking to each other, and by dinner, have a collaboration planned. It's been extremely gratifying to see that happen and to be part of that. And I see that part only getting better and I think bigger. I mean, sort of more funding, more available projects, branch out into different areas of projects, instead of basic science, social science, recovery science, lots of different elements that can be looked at for aneurysms, where they've been sort of put in with stroke or hemorrhagic stroke in the past. Christine, we've had lots of discussions how the NIH views this, but specifically to make aneurysms the reason we're doing the research has been really gratifying.
All right, thank you. Appreciate that. As you reflect over the past 30 years, and as you both already said, starting this was not that easy, and there's been a lot of ups and downs and challenges for sure. What does the growth and accomplishments of this foundation mean to you, where you both have been here for the entire 30 years, which is pretty amazing?
Yeah. Well, I think for me, like going to, recently we had the run at in Boston, where there were over 1,000 people there present. So just that, terms of that growth, 30 years ago, we certainly didn't have that many people. So the awareness has grown, which is really impressive to see. And I think, the research and advocacy has grown tremendously. And that's advocacy as well as something I never thought of, initially. But I think that is going to make a big difference going forward with brain aneurysms. I mean, my hope is, through the awareness that I really believe it's a dual effort in terms of patients and families as well as clinicians to know about the signs and symptoms. So if you go to the hospital with the worst headache of your life, to, be able, hopefully you'll get scanned. And if you have an aneurysm, hopefully, whoever the clinician is will, treat you properly. I think over the years, for sure, a lot of people thought that aneurysms were a death sentence, and they certainly are not. I think Christine uses the phrase, they're treatable and beatable, and they are. I think you have to be wise in your choice, and I think the foundation is great in terms of offering that support. We are nationwide, as well as other countries. So I think, that's kind of nice to see that you can reassure patients, you can offer people to get second opinions or third opinions. I mean, we certainly don't mind, or Ogilvy doesn't mind. People can do that. But, for me, it's been just tremendous, the awareness piece. And then we do see it physically, which is nice in terms of these road races. And they're hard to see. Sometimes you see families that have lost someone and it's devastating. And so those instances make you really focus on the research piece of it. Is there any way we can determine when an aneurysm will rupture? And many times, the patients get there for the first time and, lose consciousness, and, you're not aware. But, to the research piece, I know one of our board members is working on blood test. If you have a known family history, perhaps that blood test can show you do carry the gene, and then we take it from there. So there's been a lot of developments, and, I think, I really am pleased with the awareness piece of it.
Yeah, I really echo that. And the growth has just been phenomenal, I think. And as the head of the medical advisory board, one thing I really tried to do is involve other physicians. And, it's been great to get people involved across the country. Now we're reaching out internationally to get buy-in. I think there are parts of the world and areas where there's still surgical arrogance. I took care of the aneurysm, the patient's done with me, and that's changing. That is changing very rapidly. And it's a delight to see. And remember, I said when we started this, I was sort of reprimanded by some senior physicians. Well, now I'm approached by many other physicians who want to be part of the board, want to be part of the advisory board. And it's nice to, a lot of people want their name on something, but we're really looking for people who want to help and do something physical. Start a support group locally, get involved with the research, get involved with local information for families and patients. And that's really quite gratifying. And I try to invite people into that and interface then with Christine, so that they don't see it as, Dee Dee's or my organization, but as whoever's involved's organization. And I think people have felt that. And sometimes physicians bring us ideas and we have to think, is this really for the good of the foundation and good of patients? Or is it good for the good of the physician bringing it to us? That's sometimes something we have to work through. The other part of it that came out, which I didn't expect, is the education. And on education side, there's physician education. And we have had an initiative in the past to be sure that in medical schools, people are getting information accurately about brain aneurysms and subarachnoid hemorrhage. I know Christine has met with the curriculum advisors. We met with the folks at Harvard, and we invite people around the country to meet with their local medical schools to be sure it's in the curriculum. And actually, it was well in the curriculum here. I was impressed that on second year and third year, and then in fourth year, there's actually information about brain aneurysms. It doesn't matter if someone's going into pediatrics or, geriatrics or, OBGYN, whatever. We want them getting the basic information, what I think every medical student should know about brain aneurysms, because, sometimes the primary care, as people on this call know, the primary care physicians and the emergency room physicians are sometimes the caregivers dealing with the initial phases or diagnosis of an aneurysm.
Thank you both for that. I'm Dr. Ogilvy. I'm glad you mentioned the medical advisory board, because It's a very diverse group across the country. And for me, I always tell people, I think they're like that silent backbone of the organization, because all the statistics and information and numbers that we use about this disease is verified through the medical advisory board. So any information that you're reading has been looked at and made sure it's as most accurate and up to date as it can be. And as well as, you know, scoring the research grants every year. We had over 80 applications this year. And finally, I have all the scores in today. So I looked through sorting that out. But yes, the medical advisory board is very helpful in make sure that the foundation is putting the right information out there for everybody, and as well as sharing our information with their patients. But thank you for mentioning that. The next questions, what do you hope for the future? What do you hope the future brings in terms of brain aneurysm diagnosis and treatment?
Well, this in terms of education, to go back to that, I would like to see us do more of the pri-med education.
Yeah.
It's a lot of education and awareness towards primary care physicians, nurse practitioners, and you reach thousands of people. And again, attribute to the medical advisory board, we do ask people who are in that particular area of the country to speak at those meetings. But I think those, we reach out to many, 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 many people. And I would like to see that happen more. In terms of support groups, I was with COVID, I was very reluctant to do Zoom meetings, and now it's one of the best things we do because we reach people throughout the country. I hope, I mean, I would like to see more of those available in the future. And also, I would like to see more help for people who have suffered ruptures. I think there's a lack of, you know, neuropsychiatrists, mental health workers. It's really hard for patients. I hear this through support group to find people if you've hemorrhaged and then you're trying to get back to life. So I would like to see, you know, us somehow do more. And I guess it's continuing to get the word out. In terms of research, I think we have so many new devices available to treat aneurysms. 30 years ago, we treated a majority of aneurysms through surgery. Now we do majority through endovascular treatment, which is amazing in terms of different catheters, different coils, different flow diverters that are available. I think we can offer patients treatment with low risk. And I think we should, you know, I'm hoping we continue to do that.
Okay, Dr. Ogilvy, you want to
Yeah, I
add?
mean, I think in terms of the future, let's think really in the future. You know, give me some of your saliva and I can tell you if you have a brain aneurysm or not. That would be the, you know, the ultimate, right? Or a blood test, or you know, you walk through the scan at the airport and it tells you whether you have a brain aneurysm.
Yeah.
But actually, you know, that sounds futuristic or crazy, but there's actually initiatives in in some of the grants that have been received and along those lines of blood tests, blood studies. Then there's a whole question: if you find an aneurysm, what do you do with it? And that's the next level. Can we come up with a scan, with a test, with something? This is one that's going to rupture. This is one that'll never rupture. Because, you know, we find aneurysms at autopsy in 90-year-olds who die of pneumonia and never knew they had it, and it never ruptured. Well, who am I? Am I that person, or am I the person who's in the ICU with a hemorrhage from Saturday afternoon? That's the next level of sort of detection or wish list. And then, of course, treatments. We're always striving to make treatments safer and more effective. And those are two different things. You know, the safest treatment is no treatment, but that has no efficacy. There's no effect. And then, you know, sometimes the most effective treatment carries with it risk, and we have to balance that out. There are a ton of new devices being invented. And of course, companies love to sell things. And I think the Brain Aneurysm Foundation has done a good job with the medical advisory board and patients involved at trying to present a balanced view of some of these new devices. It's always tricky, you know. We're at Harvard and they want cutting edge research, but conservative care. You know, you sort of this balance. And I think, Christine, you have orchestrated and done a good job as new things come out. Make this available, make people aware of these treatments, And then, we really are in the process of evaluating safety and efficacy. What are the risks of using these different devices and different treatments? And I think the BAF has offered a balanced view and tried to be very fair. Because obviously, when there is a new device that has high efficacy, flow diversion is a great example. 14 years ago, a new device was developed and brought to market and made available that we now use in about a third of aneurysm patients, and it's changed the practice for the better. And no device is perfect, and none of these things is perfect. But I think the Brain Aneurysm Foundation offers that potential voice of reason and balanced view. We have no vested interest. We just want what's best for the patient. Some of the devices, it's the latest and greatest, but as we all see in all parts of medicine, that can run its course, and the job is really to help figure out what is the safest and most effective.
All right, thank you. And Dee Dee, thanks for mentioning Pri-Med. That is a really important part of our in medical education. And we did have a lecture in Houston in April. Dr. Ogilvy, I believe you're doing one in September or October.
Yeah, I must say, I have gotten incredible feedback at those when they're given and afterwards. I've had people write me 2 months, 3 months, 6 months later asking, follow-up questions and that kind of thing. And I think I've had colleagues in primary medicine go to them and say, wow, this is something I really needed to hear, and because, 30 years ago when the foundation was started, we go out and speak to primary care physicians about brain aneurysms. They say, well, I saw one once, but he did okay. We never treated it. Well, that's one patient, or 5 patients, one physician. How long is the physician in practice? Not long enough to see that patient they didn't treat then went on to have a hemorrhage 5 years later. And that, our primary physician colleagues need to see the long-term data and see how dramatically the decision-making for these things has changed. As we learn more, we're doing studies on computational flow dynamics. That is, the details of what an aneurysm looks like and how that influences flow and how that might influence rupture. And so size is important, age of patient's important, irregularity of aneurysm is important. All of that is important. And the primary care physicians really, they drink it up. They love to know more about it.
Yep, it's true. And we get feedback reports on every lecture, and always they come back, no matter who's presented, that 90-something% of these people in attendance say that they will change their practice when they go back, just because of some of the information that they've learned. And all we're trying to do is to get these folks to bring a brain aneurysm into their differential diagnosis. And I think that it usually is the outcome. So it's a really important part of the education and awareness. The last question I have for both of you: are you excited about our research symposium coming back to Boston this September? Because for those of you who don't know, we do it in a different city and state every year, and for the inclusion of a support conference on September 11th.
I am thrilled about it, especially the support conference. I mean, we are very, very excited about this, and I'm hoping this will be something that will be at least, an annual or a biannual, that we could do a support group meeting nationally offered to patients. And the research meeting is awesome that it's back in Boston. I remember vividly 30 years ago or 20 years ago, whenever we had our first research meeting in Boston, we gave away 2 grants. And now we're the biggest funder of research grants through an organization. So I am totally thrilled. And I'm hoping, with the research piece of it, I know we always say there's 1 in 50 people with a brain aneurysm, 30,000 hemorrhages. And, I often think it's probably more people affected by it. And by talking to people, everyone knows someone who's had a brain aneurysm. And I'm hoping maybe we get a better handle some way of that data. But that's all.
Yeah, this is really exciting. I mean, as Dee Dee said, if you just look at the difference between, 80 proposals this year. I
Yeah,
mean, come
that's-
on, this is incredible. And the word is out in organized neurology and neurosurgery that the BAF is the place. If you have an idea and you want to see if it's going to get traction, this is a great place to start. And the funding, the great thing about the Brain Engine Foundation grants is that people don't always need preliminary data, which you need for NIH grants. You need a really good idea and then defend it well, and then that can get funded, which is less heard of in medicine. And the other phenomenal thing, which I always love, I'm getting a little choked up because I love the research dinner and the research day.
Yeah.
The people, I don't think anywhere else in medicine where the people who raise the funding meet the people who are doing the research. And I can't tell you the number of people who have approached me from both fields, from both the researcher side and the family side, who say how meaningful that is. And we have researchers with a photograph of an aneurysm patient in their lab, and they sometimes start a dialogue or phone calls or emails with the people who've raised the money for their research. And that really gives it meaning. And then we have it set up that they have to come back after a year of funding and report on what they've done. And that also brings them to the table. That brings it right there, and really is quite poignant. So those things, and seeing the families sometimes talk to the researchers at dinner or afterwards, is incredibly meaningful. And the researchers have told me that too. It's just never, they get a grant from the Stroke Society. They don't know where that money, it's just from a governmental organization. It's not been raised from a golf tournament or some really great endeavor. So it's a unique situation, and it's really gratifying to see.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ogilvy. I think that is probably one of the best parts of the research is when they connect. I mean, when the families and the researchers connect. And I mean, obviously the families are beyond thrilled and they love asking questions and having access to this person. But I think it's been more fun for me to actually see these researchers really appreciate it. And they do, because they comment a lot on that. And it just, when you're in a lab all day, head down, looking, whatever you're looking at, to really think of the story connected to it, I think does make a big difference. So I agree on that. I think it's wonderful. And again, the collaboration that comes out of it. So it will be good to be back in Boston. I'm looking forward to it as well. So couple questions we had submitted. I'm going to turn it over to Lynn Nuttall here at the BAF office to come back on and ask those questions.
A couple questions. One is, what has been the area where you've seen the most progress over the last 30 years?
But technology, I think. I mean, Dr. Oli could probably, for sure. It's been
Yeah, I mean, it's really,
devices.
and it's not only these devices we have to treat aneurysms, but the catheters and medicines we have to get there. So sometimes, the safety of these things isn't me doing this with my hands or moving a catheter. It's the fact we have the patient on the right medical regimen of platelet, antiplatelet agents for a certain amount of time, and then blood thinners. And this has really been amazing. And the catheters we use, by comparison to 25 years ago or 20 years ago, are just dramatically different. It takes us, used to take us 2.5 hours to get to a certain spot in an artery. Now it takes us 7 minutes because of the catheter design. And the catheters are stiffer at the bottom and a little more flexible in between and very soft at the tip. And the technology that's gone into some of this is just only enhanced our ability to keep it safe.
And Lynn, I think going back, I mean, I've been in practice for 40 years. Majority of patients treated were those that had ruptured. So
Right.
some patients now, we're finding them more unruptured, and most of our treatment of aneurysms are people who are unruptured aneurysms, thank God. So I think we've
Right.
come a long way in terms of technology, the MRIs, MRAs, CT.
Scanning.
Yeah, scanning has been a huge development.
Great. And then the next question, kind of a follow-up, is what do you think are the most important priorities for the BAF over the next 30 years? As patient advocates, how can we help?
I mean, I would like to see, in terms of support, just more groups available to patients. I find that people still struggle in terms of finding support. I think trying to find more availability again for the mental health piece would be huge. I mean, I think we're doing a great job in terms of the technology piece, the advocacy. We're growing every year, so I see that as a huge piece. But I think I would like to see, in terms of patients who suffer a hemorrhage, more available for them as they get back into society and, into their families and whatnot. I think it's hard. So.
Yeah, I think two ways patient advocates can help. One is, as Dee Dee says, support and education. One to one or 1 to 10 or whatever it is. That perspective that a physician won't have on a recovery, not only from the patient's perspective, but from the caregiver's perspective, who's helping them get through this. Because realize every aneurysm patient has between 1 and 10 family members or friends supporting them. So if you do the math, it becomes a huge number of people involved. And the other element is the advocacy. That's, as a patient, when I've gone to advocacy and listened to the politicians, I'm a physician, I introduce myself. They really want to hear from the patients and their families. Those are the stories that make a difference. And it's fine with me. I love it. Tell them your story, tell them what happened. And sometimes one of them will know an aneurysm patient, have a family with an aneurysm patient. And if it's one of their contingents, they really resonate with that. And it's just great to see. And that's something that a physician, you can go and advocate and has a certain amount of impact, but really they're listening. That's a one-on-one that really has impact. So as a patient advocate, I see that as a very powerful tool.
Great, thank you. And then someone says, how far has research come with finding at least 3 common factors among population of individuals who've had aneurysms?
Well, I think it's come far. So we didn't used to know as much about family history, and now we know about 25% of aneurysms run in families. And so, and there was a time with HMOs, and maybe still people are running into this. They have a strong family history of aneurysm, and their primary care physician's savvy enough to say, wow, you should be screened. And the insurance denies it. And then they have to sort of appeal it. And thankfully, on the appeal, we can usually make the argument they need a scan. So that's one area. Smoking, obvious and huge. And women who smoke, obvious and huge. We did one study where women who smoked between the ages of 30 and 60, 19% had an intracranial aneurysm. And many of those were not ruptured, but they had an aneurysm. So these are 2 big risk factors that should be looked into.
I also think the polycystic kidney disease.
I was just going to say, and that's another element that's coming.
That's huge.
So patients with polycystic kidney disease, we're working very closely with our renal colleagues, our kidney doctors, to look at this. And we are looking at patients who have aneurysms. It turns out, as you start to look, a lot of them have had, for various reasons, abdominal scans or ultrasound, and they have a little renal cyst. They don't have polycystic kidney disease. They may have a variant, a genetic variant that would lead us to this. This is just being looked at and recognized. So there are going to be elements and subpopulations, just as in, breast cancer, there's certain genetic screening that if you have the BRCA gene, you need to get screened and you need to be maybe treated aggressively. I think in aneurysms, we're going to have a differentiation of those more likely and less likely, or higher risk, lower risk. And in the higher risk group, they're going to be screened.
Great. And then, we also had a couple of questions about where people can find support groups in their area. And if you go to bafound.org on our website, there's a section with support groups. And if there isn't something in your area and you have a specific hospital that you go to, maybe have them reach out and, they could see about starting a support group in their area. Or like Dee Dee said, she has an online support group. So you could we post those on our social media. They're posted on our website. So you can join from anywhere. So if there isn't a support group in your area, that's a great option as well, and they do help, right? I mean, you've got people from
100%
all over.
we have a person who comes from Australia every month who joins via Zoom, someone from Canada every month. So I think that is such a great option that we have now. And I do have one every month, the third Wednesday, 11 a.m. via Zoom. So please join, if you need it. I mean, it's just overwhelming, the support from caregivers as well as the patients, and, helping each person with their specific needs. And I mean, the people on the call are fantastic. They offer their personal email to reach out afterwards. So, I mean, I think there's so much benefit to joining if you need some help.
But a big thank you again to Dee Dee and Dr. Ogilvy for starting this foundation for a disease that impacts so many people. And from our perspective here, there is still so much to be done, because we hear of the losses, every week, if not, more than that, the different struggles that people go through. Like we said, so it's something that is very treatable, but you can't treat it unless you know that you have it. So hopefully a scanning protocol will come into place down the road, at least for at-risk populations and things like that, because as we tell people, particularly on the Hill, we want to keep families and communities together. And I think through all the things we do, awareness, education, the advocacy, and the research funding, hopefully we'll get to that point. And I want to just thank you to everyone that's on this webinar for your support and involvement with the organization. It means a lot. But Dr. Ogilvy and Dee Dee, any parting words?
I mean, honestly, we could not do this. The organization would not exist without Christine as a director. I think, 10 years was it for us. We needed someone, a professional, to step in. And I think you've done a phenomenal job. And Lynn as well have done really a fantastic job in trying to manage the education, the awareness, the advocacy, research, everything. So I think we could not do it without you. It's like running a small company, honestly. And to try to keep all pieces together, it's tough. I'm happy with the medical piece and support piece, but doing everything is hard. So really, thank you.
Thank you. No,
Yeah,
it's not
I mean,
necessary.
Christine, you really took it to the next level,
Mm.
and a level we had hoped it would go, and is now going and still can go. I will just tell you one quick story that I've been asked and we're going to have to give a lecture next week. And I was asked by a pediatric neurosurgeon who said, "Wait, you started the Brain Aneurysm Foundation?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "I had a brain aneurysm, and that foundation," and she's a physician, that foundation gave me more information than anywhere else.
Yeah.
So I was quite pleased to hear, you're reaching people as patient advocates and involved with the BAF. You are reaching people you don't even realize. And it's got a far-reaching net that is extremely helpful. This individual could not have been more appreciative of the information she got as she was stunned with her diagnosis and then got through it all. And this was a physician who was, ended up a neurosurgeon.
That's
And you think, gee, she knows it all. No, not at all. She doesn't know the patient side of it. So it's phenomenal. And Christine, you have taken it to the next level, which is just fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for that. But mostly, again, thank you guys for 30 years. It's pretty crazy, and very much looking forward to September. But, thank you for sharing tonight, and thank you for everyone for being on, and hope to see you all soon.
Yeah.